The president of the Palestinian Authority has accused the US of being complicit in Israeli war crimes. That's after the Biden administration's veto of a United Nations Security Council vote which demanded an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The view has been echoed by those living in the makeshift humanitarian zone inside Gaza, where charities say half the population is starving.
Order is breaking down in Gaza. It's been warned about and now it's happening. These people are desperate for everything and anything. They clamber onto one of the few aid trucks allowed to cross the border from Egypt. They start pulling out boxes, throwing them to family members or jumping off with their prize held tight. More run towards the commotion, eager to get their hands on this precious cargo. When they can, aid agencies do attempt an orderly handout of food parcels. But the reality is that what is coming into Gaza is inadequate and barely scratches the surface.
With the chaos, with this active fighting, it's not possible to do the work that is needed to meet these massive needs. And so we need supplies at a completely different scale.
To the west, on the Mediterranean coast, the people who have evacuated to Al-Mawazi don't have the opportunity to even attempt to get their hands on aid. There is none. This is a barren wasteland at the best of times. Now it's the worst. They've built their camps themselves. There are hundreds of families here now, living cheek by jowl, just surviving. These people are desperate and angry.
What happened was disgraceful. We expected more pressure, but the US will remain supportive of Israel against us. We're poor, unarmed people who live in tents as refugees. We were made refugees in 1967 and now again in 2023, when the world is supposed to be more advanced.
There is outrage across the Arab world, and in many other countries too, that the United States vetoed a Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Here in the West Bank, the Palestinian leadership accused the US of being complicit in what is described as Israel's war crimes. In the centre of Ramallah, life looks pretty normal despite what's going on in Gaza, but beneath the veneer, it isn't.
Well, in the West Bank, there is considerable anger and resentment about what's going on in Gaza, but there's also a sense that there's not much they can do about it. The Israeli security presence here is overwhelming. The IDF carry out regular raids across the whole of the West Bank, and indeed, since October the 7th, over 250 people have been killed here and more than 3,000 injured.
But these numbers are dwarfed by what is happening here in Gaza. More airstrikes in Rafah, another so-called safe area. All they can do is appeal for peace, peace that has been vetoed.
You have to stop the killing of the innocents. You have to stand with the right. I am called the international criminal courts. I'm called the international laws. Where is it? Where's the human rights? I don't see anything.
The city of Khan Yunis is now by far the most dangerous place in Gaza. Thousands are still living in what is an actual battlefield. Another huge airstrike here. They swarm over the rubble looking for survivors. But more often than not, they find the dead, carried away for yet another funeral and another family left to grieve. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News on the West Bank.
Despite a worsening humanitarian crisis unfolding in Gaza, the US has opposed the idea of a permanent ceasefire, claiming to support Israel's need to destroy Hamas. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he appreciates America's decision. Sky's Alistair Bunkle has the latest from Jerusalem.
I think if you look at the pictures in Stuart's report just then, you would wonder why on earth anybody would oppose a ceasefire in Gaza, given how dire the humanitarian crisis is and civil order does look as though it is now starting to break down. The US did oppose it last night, though, in the Security Council, and they did it really for two reasons. The first is that they do support Israel's objective to entirely eliminate Hamas, and Israel and America believe that that is ultimately the best way to achieve a situation of stability and peace, both for Israelis and Palestinians. And the Americans would argue, as I'm sure with the Israelis, that if you stop the fighting now, if you had a ceasefire now, it would just allow Hamas time to rebuild, and whether it's in a month, 6 months, or even a number of years, there would be fighting again between the two sides. The Americans also say that because of their special relationship with the Israelis, they do have that unique ability to put diplomatic pressure on the Israelis to open up border crossings for more aid, for example, to limit the number of civilian casualties and change the way that the Israelis fight the war in Gaza. I think definitely on that latter point, the number of civilian casualties, there is a gap between America and Israel. I think the Americans don't think the Israelis are doing enough to limit civilian casualties. There is one other area which looks as though it's becoming an increasing point of difference between the two sides as well, Israel and the United States, and that is how much longer this can go on for. The Israelis are saying that they would like another couple more months to keep fighting at this kind of intensity inside Gaza. The Americans are saying you might just have a few weeks.